The question of who I would prefer to have design my house between Franco Gehry and Frank Lloyd Wright would have to be, while I appreciate both of their works, I would have to go with Frank Lloyd Wright. I grew up in a less urbanized place where things were more basic and not so extravagant, and Frank Lloyd Wright kind of sticks to that process more so than Franco Gehry. Who you see on the screen here is Frank Lloyd Wright, and I'm going to show you a few pieces of his work and show you the difference between why I say I would choose him instead of Gehry to design my house. This here is one of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings. It's known as Falling Water. As you can see, while it's still a big structure, it still has a lot of nature values to it. It's not letting urban influence take over on it or have, big tall structures, so on and so forth. This here is another one of his buildings known as the Towson West, which again you can see it has a rustic feel to it as opposed to, as I've said, just overly urban, overly large, extremely tall. He enjoyed feeling that his buildings would fit more in with nature than in with cities, and that's why I stick with him. I'm going to show you one more of his. And then this building here is the Frank Lloyd Wright Home and Studio, which you can see while it has a few different looks to it, it's still very, I wouldn't say basic, but it's not as crazy as you'll see with Gehry's buildings and what they end up looking at. This is something, for a home, this is definitely compared to what Gehry designs. This is what I see as being a home. I'm going to show you some of Gehry's buildings and show you why I don't know if that's something that I would want to come home to every day. It's much more extravagant, much more over the deep end, I guess you could say, and let me show you a few examples of those. This here is Gehry's building known as the Biomuso. Just by looking at it, as I said, I don't know if this is something that I would want to come home to every day. This here looks something more like I would expect in Universal Studios or Disney World as some sort of attraction for a ride as opposed to a home for me to come home to. I've got a few more pieces of his work that I'll show you, and I think that you'll see with them as well. This here is the Dancing House. Again, it might be cool in the city to live in an apartment looking like that, have one floor. I wish I could afford them all, but I definitely think that Frank Lloyd Wright's style of being just more plain, more simple, more attached to nature is definitely something more that I would prefer living in as opposed to these crazy styles. I'll give you one. This here is the Louis Vuitton Foundation building that was designed by Gehry, and you can see with this as well that it is also a little bit over the edge, a little bit. I keep saying over the edge, but I think you get what I'm saying. It's a little bit farther out there. It's not as clean cut, squared corners. It's a little too much for a house. For an amusement park attraction, something along those lines, I think Gehry's great, but as far as to design my home, I don't think that this is something I would want to come home to every night. I think it would put me in a different universe. So, in closing, due to Frank Lloyd Wright's different styles, his more basic styles, his connections to nature, I think that he's definitely my choice for who I want to design the home. I think that Gehry's buildings, while very fascinating looking, are great, but as I said, I think they're better off for amusement parks or that type of thing. Thank you very much.